Hello everyone, my name is Mike Geig, and welcome to another episode of Unity Behind the Game. Today we are talking about Skeleton Crew by Cinder Cone, and joining me here is Lawrence Bishop and Tancred Dyke-Wells. How you guys doing?
Hi.
Hey guys.
All right.
Hey guys.
Howdy. Everything going well today? Doing all right?
Yeah, awesome. So slight panic, last minute change of rooms for the podcast because my kids are having music lessons. I realized at the last minute, but
nice.
Yeah, all good.
New normal. All right, fantastic.
Normal for 2020, definitely.
Yeah, tell me about what your guys' roles at Cinder Cone are.
So I'm the tech director, so responsible for all the programming, and both of us do design, and then Tank, you can talk for yourself.
So I'm kind of artist or art lead and creative director. So, career-wise, I've always done kind of both art and game design in this slightly schizophrenic way. So, still doing that. Getting to do that with indie, which is great. Primarily art direction. But as Lawrence says, we're both heavily involved in overseeing the game design as well.
Awesome. So before we start talking about the game Skeleton Crew, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about Cinder Cone, how it came about and where you got to where you are today?
So Lawrence and I we've both been working in the industry for quite a long time, myself for more than 20 years. But we worked together at a bigger company called Headstrong Games, where I was creative director for a long time, working on a Rabbids game together and I think a few other things. But subsequently, I'd kind of had the classic midlife crisis thing of deciding to quit my AAA job and go off and start a new mini studio, and had done that and made survival RPG called Smoke and Sacrifice with Unity, and that was a fantastic experience. But like many indie projects, it kind of came out the back end of it hugely rewarded in many ways, but also quite beaten up, and partly because basically in my business partner at the time, wanted to go off and do something else afterwards, maybe something a bit more sensible. So, but I've been bitten so severely by the indie bug. I really wanted to do it all over again. I love creating our own studio and love creating our own games from scratch and just having that creative control. And Lawrence, I remember from back in the day. Obviously, worked with probably literally hundreds of programmers over the years, but Lawrence really stuck out in my mind as a really awesome guy, both in terms of professional competence and just being a nice guy to work with. He doesn't know all this, but he's never heard me say it anyway. I approached him and did my best to sell him on the idea of starting a new company together. Which we did, and from a creative standpoint, I think Smoke and Sacrifice is very much a kind of like, to some extent, we had a grand vision for the game at the outset. Very much, like anything, it evolved as we were making it. But it's this dark fantasy adventure where it's a mother who goes in search of a stolen child, and it's an ecological allegory. Right?
This is the other game, right?
Yeah, sorry, this is my previous title, just for clarity. But for Skeleton Crew, I think we wanted to make something that was as open and inclusive as possible, where everyone on the team could really contribute, and where we didn't go into it with a kind of lockdown definition of this is what the game is going to be. So we had a kind of, so we basically drew on all this stuff that we just really loved in terms of feel. So, Diablo and Doom and D&D and Ghosts and Goblins. But we just wanted a project where if something worked, we could pursue it. Like we didn't kind of go, right, it doesn't, it's at page 33 of the game design document doesn't actually allow us to pursue this avenue. So I'm afraid, we wanted something. I
like your voice there, by the way, just throwing that out there.
That's my normal voice, impression. Actually. This is the one I'm just putting on. But we wanted to be able to pursue ideas that worked, and the game very much has gone that way actually. So so totally unpretentious kind of concept. Really wanted to be just like super fun, multiplayer, immediate, just kind of colorful action, and as hopefully I'm not sure if you listeners will know this yet, but it's all about kicking ass in a very literal way. If you'll pardon my French, it's a game that's literally about kicking butt the entire time.
Very much so. Well, real quick, Lawrence, do you agree? Was Tank a super genuine person, and you just couldn't wait to work with him again?
Working with Tank previously and now, I'd been doing a lot of freelance work on a bunch of indie titles, mostly in Unity, so getting a lot of experience doing the stuff that I need to be doing. And when he approached me to set something up, I jumped at the chance to be able to, be working on something from the ground up, making something fun. And had good experience with Tank before, so it's kind of a no-brainer, really.
Nice. So this game, Skeleton Crew, you said it's all about fun and I'll say kicking butt, in this side, which I played it just actually today for a while before joining this call, and absolutely is super fun. So tell us a little bit about this game. How long was it in development? What's the concept? Things like that.
So we started in November of 2018. Yes, that's right. And we initially set out to just the only thing starting, as Tank said, we had it very open to start with. So the only thing that we were kind of anchored by at the start was a kind of gothic visual style and multiplayer co-op platform brawler. And we had a designer on at the time for the prototype who, inspired by Smash Brothers, suggested this kind of launching mechanic where you just boot things around. And so from his initial seed, we developed a lot further as we went along.
Yeah, that's right. So it's so that was a guy, Charles, who's actually only on the project for 10 days. Great guy, really great designer. But when we were building the demo, just wanted to bring some extra minds into the process, and he wasn't with us very long, but obviously made this very significant contribution, because the idea of launching at the time was really just, as Lawrence says, it was kind of a Smash Bros reference. It was just a kind of, okay, you can kick enemies up in the air, you can launch them and juggle them, right? But as we implemented that, this is a kind of core example of what we're talking about, really. It just seemed kind of interesting and something that we could possibly lean into. So it started off with the kind of typical, you could launch them on a parabola and hit the enemies when they're in the air. But then we found when we magnified the power of that, and Laura, correct me if I'm misremembering some of the stuff, but making it more deterministic, making it something where you could kind of angle your shots and line up your ricochets and just kick things in straight lines with predictable rebounds, suddenly opened up a whole lot of gameplay. And so
that's right. Particularly the Smash Brothers influence initially had us, when you wear down the health of the enemy, they become more susceptible to being launched, and that felt a little too fuzzy and kind of irritating. You never really quite knew what you were getting when you were launching something, and so we backed off of that kind of analog scale and made it when you kick something, it always does the same thing. It always bounces and smashes things, which opens up puzzle opportunities and other combat opportunities that weren't there before.
Right. Yeah. So over the course of the game, we've just sort of continued kind of burrowing into that or going deeper and deeper down that that rabbit hole sort of thing. So, in fact, again, I think it was a friend of mine, another game designer, who's come around and watched me play, and he was like, "Yeah, so I kind of want to kick the guy's head off, and then I want to pick up his head and kick it at someone else." And I was like, "Yeah, So that this thing of layering really started getting going, and then we were like, "Okay, maybe you can kick off bits of armor. Maybe you can kick off their shields." They now pick their helmets back up and put them back on, and all kinds of stuff, and also all the pinballing stuff. So the idea of it, integrating the kicking into the platform and traversal gameplay. So that again is where we've kind of ended up innovating and doing something a bit unique. But it's also been where all the challenges have lain, I guess. It's kind of it's always the way. I think anytime you do something different, that's where the hard stuff always is, and that's definitely been the case on this project. But it's also been the most exciting.
Yeah, it was interesting. A few times I would be playing in a level and I'd kick a rock at some enemies, and I'd be running forward and it would bounce and it hit the chandelier. The chandelier would then fall on me, and I was like, okay, yeah, right, forgot about that, didn't think about that. It was actually quite neat to just have it bounce all around and affect so much of the game level.
Yeah, I mean, controlling the chaos, like within reason, like a certain amount of chaos is a whole lot of fun, right? But when you've got 4 players in there, and the potential for total mayhem does get quite high. So that's another thing that we're really having to try and find the sweet spot on, is making things kind of predictable enough that players can employ strategies they can rely on and play in a way that they can feel like they're in control, but also having those kind of happy accidents at the same time.
Well, you mentioned 4 players, right? So you've obviously built this for multiplayer or couch co-op. And what was it like to design a game that does both, right? Because, we often see either a couch co-op game or a multiplayer game, and then there's like technology requirements for both.
Yeah. The co-op, like the couch co-op stuff, was very easy to implement in that because we'd separated input from action, and so characters could be controlled by AI or they could be controlled by input, and so once you have that, multiple inputs can control multiple characters. It's very straightforward, but the networking was a whole additional load of work to do, and I'm still sorting stuff out for it right now. So yeah, it's complicated for
I think that's the best summary of network game development, that I've heard. It's complicated. It's
Yeah, I think Lawrence is still very much in the throes of wrestling that particular beast into submission. But yeah, it's interesting. Like, I know some people have had a lot of challenges with couch co-op, and I've worked on projects in the past where that very much was the case. We did a Lord of the Rings game at one time featuring Aragorn as the principal protagonist, and about a year into development, the decision was made that this needed to be a couch co-op game, and we needed a second player who could play as Gandalf, but it was hugely difficult to implement at that time because all of the code was written around this assumption that there was a player, that there was a player character, and that introducing a second one was really problematic. But with this game, I've never worked on something actually where it's been so modular and where it's almost bizarre. There's so little differentiation in terms of what you're dealing with in Unity between a player character and an NPC, and it's really you can almost just take an NPC and hook them up to certain inputs or apply certain additional attributes to them, and they become a player, and vice versa.
That's smart to extract all that and just set it kind of as a layer on top that just sort of passes things in and controls it. Yeah, absolutely, that's cool.
I think a lot of games have the AI directly control movement and other aspects of what the character is doing, but the way that we've got it is that the AI actually generates input, like fake input. So it's like, I am pushing my control stick left, is what the AI pretends, but it's just, so it makes it extremely simple to switch between making it an AI character or a playable character, because you just, it's actually input or it's fake input. It's the same conceptually.
I think that's also very valuable because it makes the AI play by the same rules as the player. Often in games with AI, they can do things a player can't, like try to move left and right in fractions of a moment, that you couldn't with a controller.
But on the other hand, that does also come with a downside that it means that more different enemy behaviors are slightly more difficult to add in that, because you may want them to behave a little bit differently to the player. And so you have to work within these constraints. It doesn't stop you from doing things, but you just have to think about things in a different way.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about this concept of fun, and you mentioned things like Super Smash Brothers, and you mentioned this game that came before, and this sort of more serious sort of RPG style. So for this game, for Skeleton Crew, if you had to sort of describe who your target player was, right? This is the typical person that's just gonna just love this game. Let's call this person Aaron. How would you describe Aaron? I love coming up with names for these people, by the way.
Honestly, like, I mean, I think I read once that kind of resonated with me was when conceiving of a project like if you're making a Barbie Horse Adventures or something, or maybe that's a brand name, shouldn't do it, but if you're making a game of that nature, don't conceive of like a target demographic, a kind of generalized mass of people you want it to appeal to. Think of like one person, like a real individual who you think is going to be appropriate for, like Aaron, and make it like just perfect for that person. And I think I really kind of subscribe to that. I think in many ways, often your best advice in these kind of scenarios is to make something that you believe in yourselves as a team, and that if you treat yourselves, the team, as the target audience, and build something that you believe in and that you really enjoy, then other people will find that enjoyment at the same time. If you're sort of trying to create something to please an imagined person who's out there somewhere but is somewhat non-specific, I think that can be difficult. So I mean, we play it. We play it as much as we can. I get my kids to play it. That's always they're pretty. They're pretty good designers actually, because they play a lot of games, and they give me a lot of pretty unfiltered feedback, so that's useful.
They've been the main QA for most of the project.
But we were playing Spelunky and Broforce and those kind of Couch Co-op multiplayer games, and Smash Bros, and all of those things fed into this experience. Castle Crashers. So yeah, but I think speaking for myself, I don't know how Lawrence feels about this, but I think we're both trying to make something that we believe in and that we enjoy ourselves. And so I guess we're the target audience. So.
Fair enough. Lawrence, anything to
I guess it should appeal to people who like action platformers, but also like co-op madness. So if you enjoy the frenetic nature of things like Overcooked or I don't know. Also, Trine's probably a good touchstone in that
nice.
There's puzzle solving, but just kind of unexpected things can happen with the environment that you can have. You can get a lot of fun and amusement out of that stuff.
Nice. Cool. So, I mean, you had mentioned that you've both used Unity in the past, and had a bit of experience there. Was that the primary factor in using Unity for this title, or what was the deciding factor for that technology?
I mean, I think a huge part of it was that we both had experience with it, because if you have experience with something, you're better at using it. So it gives us a better starting point. But also, from my own personal point of view, the 2D tools in Unity seemed much more useful and flexible and powerful for this particular project than I'd seen for some other engines. Okay,
fair enough. I've got to ask, since you brought it up, like what 2D tools were particularly flexible?
So let me think.
I don't have to put you on the spot, but
so I mean, just the editor has a 2D mode, which is a great thing to start with. Not all editors have something that you can just switch to 2D viewing in the first place. More recently, we switched to 2019.4, which allowed us to use the universal render pipeline with the 2D renderer, which has great support for varied lighting. We also use the tile map system for level creation, so that's
nice.
Very helpful. Don't know if there's anything else that immediately comes to mind.
Fair enough. No, that's awesome. That's great. Okay, so you guys are building this game. you've designed it and you're playing through it and all this. What's your biggest priority for this game? Like, what are you really hoping to achieve with it? Good. That was a good question.
I'm not sure there's a really profound answer to that. I think, it just sounds, I'm just trying to look beyond something really basic, like saying we just want it to be really fun and for people to enjoy it. Because it is, this is not a kind of metaphor for depression type indie game, my last project was, very much had worthy goals in that sense. It was a lot of, allegorical story about pollution and dehumanizing effects of labor and all these kind of things. And this game is really just about like kicking monsters.
That's really completely acceptable.
Hopefully, especially this year, it's kind of something that people would welcome into their lives, because it's it's really just meant to be fun and entertaining and not preachy in any way. So. I think, in terms of what we're trying to achieve and to innovate, I think we want to bring something fresh to the genre, to platform brawling, and we keep trying to do that still at the moment, chasing design ideas. So again, just another example. This is going off on a tangent slightly, but another thing that kind of came up during development, which we ended up leaning into and making quite a major feature of, was these usable items, these enemy drops that you could then do something with. And we weren't expecting that. That wasn't even in the original pitch at the time we signed the deal. But just as an example, there's a big kind of green plague mummy boss. If you defeat him, he drops this, what looks like a kind of Hulk smash mitt. It's like a big green fist, basically. And Lawrence was like, I kind of want that to like just spring out like a boxing glove on a spring when I use it. I'm like, okay. And we did that, and it's really fun. And now you can run around, and then we chased that. We were like, okay, so what would these other creatures drop? Okay, maybe there's a it's a bit like a beholder in D&D. We have our own name for it, but it's a floating kind of eyeball monster. You got to get it when its eyes open. It drops its eyeball. You can use its eyeball to petrify the other enemies and turn them to stone, and then pick them up and kick them. And we just chased those kind of videos. So. I guess, what we're trying to achieve with it, certainly from a dev point of view and a process point of view, is to pursue what works and to let everyone on the team contribute. And to have a development environment and a design process where good ideas get included. Really, again, like back in when I was at Headstrong. I worked on some very top-down projects. In fact, frankly, I've kind of led some very top-down projects. In my early days, I was really quite, a little bit concerned about controlling the project and, taking a somewhat dictatorial stance at times. But I really noticed when we made a game called House of the Dead Overkill for Sega, which is, House of the Dead game, that the team's inclusion in that game and their opportunity to really contribute, like everyone on it, and to feel like they had ownership, made a huge difference to the amount of kind of energy and fun that was going on in the dev environment. And something Nintendo always used to say to us is like, when the team are having fun making the game, that fun goes through into the game, and you will feel it. You'll feel it. The players will feel it. So
absolutely,
we really, I think, with this project, try to create that kind of environment. Sorry.
No, I was saying that stood out to me when we spoke just the other day, and I was asking you guys, what you do, and both of you were like, well, designer in this and designer in this, and actually everyone's kind of a designer, and that's the first time anyone's ever answered that way. That's pretty cool that everyone has a stake in seeing this thing through, has some say in this thing, and I think that, as you had said, that comes through in the passion and the fun and the wacky items and some of the jokes, and I think that's pretty cool.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, I'm glad it is actually coming out the other end. It's not just us going crazy in our development goblin caves and doing weird stuff that people don't appreciate.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's coming through.
I've enjoyed the humor. Am I allowed to say the name of the hero group? I don't know how much is given away.
Yeah.
I love the fact that the hero group is
public
Yeet.
information now.
just Yeet. Let's Yeet. I just thought that was hilarious. And the hero so far is classic.
Yeah, the Yeet is it's an acronym. They are the Human Eldritch Extermination Team. That's their official designation. So.
And I like the one hero was the reigning beard champion, and I heard that and I thought, I got a little ways to go, but maybe I'll get there. I'll work on it. So you said like the kind of one of the primary things you started with is the idea that this was this sort of gothic styling, and then you sort of just otherwise freeform from there. Like, what was sort of the style and influence behind the art and stuff like that? Like, why gothic and why this art style?
I mean, honestly, a lot of it is just personal taste, and that's really just to do with stuff that, speaking from my own part, stuff I grew up with and that I love. Because, as I say, coming out the back of an indie game, I was kind of exhausted. And in the ideal world, right, you finish your project, you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to take a year off and, seek new inspiration and, sit by the pool for a while and see what ideas come to me. But unless your royalties are life transforming, that's not really how it is. You need to get back to work straight away, right? So I kind of felt I needed to put a lot of fuel back into Tank as quickly as possible and just kind of try and creatively re-energize myself. And that was at the same time as needing to find a new business partner and start a new company and propose a new idea. So I just felt that the most straightforward way of doing that was, as we've talked about, come up with something that's really just about fun, and that was focused entirely on play mechanics, I guess, on gameplay first and fun first, but also just to re-energize myself. I was like, okay, well, I love, if I was in my other room, I'd be showing my first edition D&D. D&D and Diablo and Quake and Doom and all those kind of quasi-diabolic, there's a bit of, Cthulhu mythos stuff in there. I mean, I just love that stuff is the short answer, really. And I think a lot of other people, in the business and who love video games do too. There's nothing exclusive about that, but I find it inspirational. And I also like cute stuff. I made Battalion Wars back in the day for Nintendo, and that was at a time that was kind of like before there were games like Clash of Clans, where that kind of approachable, colourful, cartoony look was something that had been popularized for adult audiences. But I've always loved doing cute, stylized, charming, whimsical, approachable stuff. And there's a lot of Ghosts and Goblins in there, which again, I'm old enough to played that in the arcades and been just very and Gauntlet as well. Actually, they haven't referenced Gauntlet, but yeah, Wizard Needs Food. That kind of 4-player multiplayer Gauntlet. There's a lot of that in there, and it's really just coming. It's just stuff that's in my DNA really from when I was a kid. So yeah, and just needing to, as I say, be kind of creatively energized by stuff I love. But yeah, fortunately, I'm far from being the only person on the team who loves that stuff. Sophie, our artist, is way more goth than I ever was. She's constantly picking out kind of gothic wooden furniture and stuff for her house, and it's nice. She takes it to the next level. So a lot of the environment art and these cool all the carved stonework and so on. That's coming from Sophie. So. Yeah,
even beyond the gothic side of the art style, the proportions is something that I've really enjoyed. Partially because, so for example, when you pick up a key in the game, the keys are outsized relative to the characters, so they kind of heft them around like a shotgun before putting them into a door, and that's like something that I find really satisfying in how stupid it looks.
Yeah. It's always like the characters with just the giant gloved hands and whatever, just the disproportion. It makes it just sort of fun and absolutely. What were some of like with the graphics and these design choices and stuff, what were some of the things that was just maybe the hardest to get right? That either with the art or the design itself, where it just took a lot of iteration to really nail what you were thinking?
One of the biggest things is probably the balance between trying to get players to want to kick and not having the kick be completely overpowered and make other aspects of the combat irrelevant. So adding in things that you kick off with enemies to make them more vulnerable makes a big difference. So you have interesting ways to interact with different types of enemies. But, I mean, we are still tweaking the balance on those things, trying to figure out, like, because some of those things feel optional, and so if that's the case, you just kind of always take the path of least resistance. You just like, just mash, go through. So yeah, that's been really quite tricky, nailing that balance. One thing that I think we still haven't really got sorted is encouraging the use of the ranged weapons that the characters have. So like the knight can throw little axes, the witch can throw snowballs. Each character has their own different things that they throw, but a lot of players just don't use those at the moment.
I did with the witch, but not so much with the knight, because it felt like what you do is, as a magic user, is you throw magic, but the knight was like, I got this big old lance, I'm gonna stab people.
Quite good then. That's good to hear that the different characters' personalities come through and you do different things with them. So
yeah, like an archetype choice. No, actually, and speaking of characters, well, actually, you know what? I'll let Tank, if you want to answer that, if you have any ideas about the design stuff. But then I do want to talk about the characters. Like, what for your perspective, Tank? What were maybe some of the hard things to just get right in your world?
Lawrence is absolutely right. And just to echo something, I said earlier, it's like where you innovate is where you're going to struggle. It's always where the value is, and it's always actually what publishers are most interested in, and the audience to some extent is like, okay, what's different, right? What's new? But it's obviously it'd be so much easier just to make a standard side-scrolling combat platformer, kind of Castlevania, Metroidvania-esque title. But where you introduce a whole new mechanic like that, it's how do you stop it, as Lawrence says, becoming a dominant strategy? Like, if it's this great, super powerful thing, how do you stop players from just doing that all the time and making the other components redundant? So it's finding a role for it and finding a role for each of the other things you can do, your cool defense moves and your projectile moves, and which has its own value. So giving it a unique and specific role in combat, and putting pros and cons into each of the different things you can do. That was a challenge, and also seamlessly integrating it into platforming, so it didn't feel like, okay, I'm doing platforming, now I'm doing a kicking puzzle, now I'm platforming, but making it feel continual. And so for example, having platforms that there's like spiky platforms and you need to kick something at them to invert them temporarily so you can stand on them and then proceed, or flowers that only blossom when you kick things at them. So taking your new core feature that's innovative and integrating that into these other more kind of established forms of gameplay, I think was the challenge. Yeah. Okay. Cool. But sorry, characters.
Yeah, so I saw that. So I played the two characters, and then I got to like the Hall of Heroes level select area, and I saw all the potential characters that I have not yet unlocked, and I thought, oh, okay, there are a lot of characters in here. So one, I wanted to ask you a little bit about like all of these characters and the designs of all these characters, but I also want to ask you like what each of your favorite characters are.
Oh God, well that kind of keeps changing. I mean, so yeah, the game is all about the characters. That's really the long game, right? The metagame in our game is about acquiring and then customizing and leveling up each of these new characters, and there's 12 of them at the moment, and who knows after launch, right? But the other thing we're doing, hopefully, there that's quite innovative. In a Metroidvania, classically, you unlock abilities, and those abilities grant you access to new areas of the world, right? Like you get your stomp or your swim power or whatever, right? But it's your single avatar in which those skills reside, and here, by virtue of discovering and unlocking these new characters, you actually also gain access to new areas of the world, because each of them have unique traversal abilities and resistances and powers. So, your succubus character is flame resistant, so she can breach flame barriers that previously you couldn't get through once you've unlocked her. And the night elf can traverse through barriers of magical energy. Our Gillman can swim. The vampire can turn into a little cloud of bats and go through little narrow gaps. There's all kinds of things like this. So the world actually opens up in conjunction with unlocking the characters. But yeah, I mean, creating 12 unique characters, each of which has their own, all these different interesting attributes and is genuinely unique. I mean, I think that was really important to us, not to just kind of reskin characters, but to give them really special attributes and value. That's a big challenge, just because it's just a lot of stuff. But it's really fun as well. I'm not complaining. Sure. Favorites? I don't know. It changes all the time. And then the audio guys will come in and they'll do an audio pass and they'll make a character that you were kind of so about. You just love them. Like we've got it. There's a Dia de Muertos skeleton. I don't know if we should be keeping some of these characters secret, but anyway. And
I won't tell anyone, I promise.
Yeah. Like he did have a piñata bat, and then somebody said he should have a guitar. So he's now got a guitar, and he's going beating the hell out of everyone with his guitar, nice. And kind of making these rather charming sort of strumming noises as he does so. So he kind of moved up the rankings when those changes were made, and we keep trying to do that. Really, just make each of them more and more kind of characterful and appealing, as we go, really.
Nice.
I don't know, who's your favorite, Lawrence?
I think he needs work, but Byron is probably my favorite. He's the demon hunter, and one of the things you can do with him is you can throw like bear traps on the floor, and then when you whip an enemy, you can pull them towards you into the trap. So he's got this kind of 2-stage combo setup, which feels quite satisfying to execute. He's got a good style as well. He's Bloodborne-esque, tricorn hat.
Nice.
The character I was most looking forward to is someone who's been cut, which is unfortunate, but maybe they will come in the future. Okay. It was a duchess that turns into a werewolf.
Nice. I like that. Fair enough. All right.
Yeah, everybody, if you buy Skeleton Crew, buy it enough, then we'll do the DLC, and then we'll, she'll
get the Wolf Duchess.
Following up.
Fair enough. I like it. I'm looking forward to that now. Awesome. So, all right. So we talked about, a lot of the design and art aspects and stuff like that. When it came to actually developing this, right? So, there's obviously a lot of work that goes into building a game that's modular, so you can have bots and AI and local players and multiplayer and stuff like that. And there's always a lot of considerations, especially if we're pushing the bounds graphically in terms of like lighting and particle effects and all this cool stuff. So, what were some of the optimization things that you had to do? And I also know that you have a kind of funny optimization story that I'd love to hear again. But yeah, what were some of the things that you worked on in that regard?
So I learned a lot from a bunch of different talks that people have done about optimizing for Unity. And one of the big things to avoid is using the built-in update methods for lots and lots of objects. So it's fine to use the update methods, but not for everything, because the more you use it, it has a cost associated with calling it. So having a centralized manager that can control different things will help in that respect. Also, for the AI, I made sure to make them only decide what they're doing periodically rather than every single frame. So there's sometimes a few seconds maybe will go by, but quite often a lot less, but it does make a big difference. And all of their updates are offset from each other, so they're not all updating every time. So they'll be spread out over time, one frame, this guy will wonder what he's doing, and the next frame, another guy will wonder what he's doing. So spreading out a lot of that across the updates in general. The story that I mentioned to you before, I guess I'll get into that now. When we were initially making a demo for EGX last year, I was having real issues with performance. The game was not even reaching 20 frames a second, I think. It was, a real dog, and I was spending a lot of time trying to improve things. So I was profiling, figuring out what was slow, improving it repeatedly. And eventually I started having other issues with my computer, and I did some diagnostics and found that my CPU was not being cooled at all and was running at over 100 degrees, and so was running very slowly for everything that it was doing. So I managed to hook up a fan and cool down the CPU, and found that the result of all of my optimizations had meant that the game was running at 250 frames per second in the edit, which was very satisfying.
I'd imagine so. It can happen to anybody. It really can.
Yeah, I mean, like having this shackled, what's the word I'm looking for? Handicap. Having a handicap whilst optimizing, I guess, kind of helps.
I'm sure you discovered a lot of optimization techniques that you wouldn't have really needed to dig into or whatever, and ultimately probably gave you a lot more leeway to do a lot of other stuff with the game. So, yeah. But just a word of advice for everyone listening: check your CPU fans. You know, how long has it been since you've actually made sure it was running? I don't know. Always a good idea. They do have a limited lifetime. No, I enjoy that very much. That's a great story. Awesome. So this game, I assume, can you talk at all about, when this might be available and where, how people are going to find it, play it?
Yeah, so we don't have a release date yet, but Q1 next year is our target window. I'm not sure if I can even say the month, but as early as possible, very early in next year, basically. And we're going out on Steam. I mean, the Steam page is live now. If you want to wishlist the game or check us out, have a look at the trailer, screenshots, just have a look at Skeleton Crew on Steam. We do hope to go onto a whole bunch of other platforms as well afterward, but that's all TBD and to be announced. So, but it is, it's very much obviously a game that we hope will be very much at home on console and on people's for couch co-op and so on. And then I'm not sure if we can talk about. So we're going to have the demo in the Steam Autumn Festival if you want to try it out. And then beyond that. I think we can talk about.
I have no rules.
I think we can talk about the beta. Which is Halloween, not entirely coincidentally. So specific plans for that a little bit, I think, still to be announced. But we are hoping, that people will be able to take part in that and give some feedback and there'll be a much bigger portion of the game than it's available in the demo. So and a very limited window of opportunity to try it out. But if you feel like playing something spooky with pumpkins in it. That you can kick on skeletons' heads, and then the pumpkin sticks on the skeleton's head, and you can pick up the skeleton and kick him at something else.
Classic.
Halloween is the time to come and try it out.
I don't know when this is being published, but hopefully, if it's before it goes live, you can check it out. And if it's after it goes live, hope you enjoyed it. We'll see what happens there. So, we'll start wrapping up. I have just a few other questions here that I'd love to get your insights in. So. After all this, what would you say you're most proud of with this game?
I mean, go ahead.
No, go.
Well, I mean, this is a personal thing, and really, it's more about process than necessarily like something I would try and pitch to potential. People are going to play the game, although hopefully it is to their benefit. But like, I think when you're making games, you're trying to kind of capture lightning in a bottle, and I think to create the conditions to do that, it's actually about process. It's not. People talk about really talented teams and great ideas and all these kind of things, but there's lots and lots of super talented people out there, and there's lots and lots of great ideas. But you kind of need to have a working process that allows those things to blossom and to come to fruition. So I feel like what personally I'm most proud of so far in the development of the game and what's hopefully coming to fruition in the end experience is, creating a studio culture where everyone on the team is having a good time and they're contributing ideas, and they feel they can make a difference, and where they know if they have a good idea that we'll listen to it and pursue it, and that hopefully the fun they're having making the game is coming out in the game. So it's creating that kind of company culture that has engendered hopefully a development process, an inclusive development process that will, I hope, translate into something super, super fun. Because it's not like we kind of wrote it down in a design document beforehand and then stuck to that. It's much more about pursuing what we've discovered along the way actually works. So that's what I'm most proud of, in terms of Cinder Cone and Skeleton Crew.
Nice. Lawrence?
I guess I would say, so when we started, one thing I definitely wanted to do was make sure as much power to create and iterate and make changes was in the hands of the designers or anyone who's using the editor. And I think I've achieved that pretty well with the way that we've structured how things are put together. This modular approach of like being able to just mix and match, like play with Legos, basically making things behave in different ways. I think that has worked very well, and like anyone can change how things behave quite easily without having to ask for a code rewrite necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely second that. Actually, we haven't really talked about that, but like that's kind of been huge. And
well, let's talk about it.
Lawrence is definitely one of those coders who kind of just like, if you want something to work a certain way, he will basically provide you with the means to do everything and anything to do with the thing you just described, kind of thing, and leave you to make it. But so I spend a lot of time doing kind of data work and design work, but it's really fun. It's kind of like, I haven't really coded since the 80s when I was doing stuff on my BBC Micro in BASIC, right? But I used to make games from scratch, and I still love all that. And I do it with my kids, making scratch games and so on. But I almost feel like I can do bits of that now, just because of the way Lawrence has given us all these kind of interactive building blocks, these components that you can use together to make stuff happen. So like, just to give you one example, but we've got a mini boss called the Hell Knight, and he's got this big spiky helmet. And you kick stuff at him you have to kick stuff specifically at his helmet to get it off. And you can then either kick it, use it as a weapon. But I was like, you really want to put that on? Like, it looks like that's what that usable item should do. But we didn't have any kind of like wearables code as such. But just because of all these the power and the flexibility of all these components that Lawrence had put together, I could say, okay, so if you pick this item up on use, cause a new status effect, which will, status effects being things like being replenished or poisoned or set on fire, which activated a component which was on the player template, which was the helmet that was already there. And then I could apply a whole lot of attributes to that, make it protective, give it armor, give it a certain amount of lifespan, make it, deteriorate when it was having stuff happen to it, totally independently without asking for any code help, because it was already there in terms of all these, as Lawrence says, like kind of Lego-like building blocks. Just let me sort of, I felt like I was, oh wow, I'm making a feature here almost.
Again, very modular.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really good. It's like super powerful. The downside is you can just find myself spending all day kind of making stuff happen, because you have that power. Instead of saying, "Oh, Lawrence, could you make it so this happens?" He's like, "Yeah, you can already do that."
A key part of it was basically that I wanted to remove like a bottleneck from development, because quite often I've been in projects before where the code has been a bottleneck, because people are just like, I want to be able to do this, and it's like, okay, well, we need to write a feature for that. We need to spend time doing that. Whereas with this approach, it's like, obviously it takes a while to get going, because you have to add components bit by bit, but it's multiplicative, because every new thing that gets added can be mixed with the other things that already exist, and give even more results than before. So,
So you can pick up chickens and use them, and then they start flapping, and that allows you to fly all through, various different properties and events being triggered. Just like in real life. So, it's kind of ironic because I feel like Lawrence has sort of given everyone this power to do all this stuff independently, in order that he not be a bottleneck, and so that they don't constantly need to be tugging on his shirt asking him to do stuff for them. But we are still spending all day, every day, tugging on his shirt asking him to do stuff for us, and he's very nice about it.
Just do more.
And he does it straight away all the time as well. So
awesome. Just a couple more questions for you here. So, as this is the first time you're working together as a team making this game, what sort of advice would you give, developers who are work together as a team for the first time, building their first game?
Communication is very, very important. Make sure that you know what other people are doing, and I mean, personally, I would say always be responsive to people's requests. Don't act like your time is precious. I do not consider my time more valuable than anyone else's. Like, if anybody needs something doing, I want them to feel free to ask me. So, just respond.
Constantly take advantage of that.
Fair enough.
He's like, oh, Lawrence actually does stuff when you ask him to, usually straight away. I think I'll just ask him to do stuff all day long, and not let him get on with the network code. It's open to exploitation. I mean, it's just kind of obvious stuff, really. I think, game dev is fun, right? But it's like it's a bit of a powder keg as well. It's a very high pressure environment. People tend to work too long, too late. People get very, very passionate and attached to ideas. And egos can really come to the fore there. And thankfully, I think, we're a pretty mature team. Most of us have either worked together over long periods in the past, or have just been doing it for a while, one way or another. And so, and I think the nature of the project as well means people aren't too possessive about specific design ideas or approaches. We do just throw it in there and see what works, and if it works, it's a good idea, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But yeah, I think you just have to watch out. You have to be really careful that in the heat of discussing ideas and things you're attached to or you're not attached to, that you are respectful of everyone else on the team continually, and that you really try and see things from other people's point of views, and take time out to really think about things when you need to, and just stay happy and be nice to each other, because it's very easy not to. I think it's very easy to, when you're pressured and tired and so on, to lose your temper with people, and then it's very hard to make anything good in those conditions where you've got sourness between people, and of course it can actually break up a team. So it's a really obvious sort of thing to say, but I also think it's quite difficult in practice for people to prioritize that, to prioritize relationships, and being nice to each other.
And maybe not exploit Lawrence so he can get the net code done.
It's really good though. It just does stuff.
That's rare. It's rare, so it just does stuff. All right, so one last question. I see we're just about at time here. So what's next for Cinder Cone? What do you guys? I mean, obviously the game has yet to come out, but what's the big plan post-launch?
We really want to continue to support it and to build on the game and to expand it. Really, I mean that's what we're really hoping to do. It's a big game. I'm not going to say number of hours, but it's many hours to get through. But there's a whole lot of extra content we're hoping to make, both in terms of characters and play modes. Again, I won't say we're going to do a certain play mode in case we don't get the opportunity to, but we'll certainly have those in the wings. We very much see it as like a live game that we want to have a community for and listen to people and see what their reactions are. But yeah, I think to be honest, we want to be carrying on making this game for some time to come. It's got a lot of life in it and a lot more to go. Beyond that, making beautiful fantasy action games. I think it's kind of the broad remit of the studio.
We have some kernels of ideas for what we might do afterwards. They're not ready to discuss in the slightest, but there are plans.
All right, fair enough. Awesome. Well, thanks very much. So again, just as we're wrapping up here, this has been Cinder Cone with me here. We got Lawrence and Tancred here, and we're talking about the game Skeleton Crew. So awesome. And thanks, guys, so very much for hanging out, talking with me, talking about the game, let me play it. It's super duper fun, and I just got to stop dying so much. But other than that, it's very enjoyable. The environment gets me every time. But thank you so very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks everyone, and thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you next time.